Okay, so my presentations. The next one is one that I do at most TDSOs, and it's basically reviewing interesting occultation opportunities primarily for Australian and New Zealand observers over the next 12 to 18 months. A little bit of a slight difference this year. Because we're online and we have such a large number, perhaps the majority of our listeners are actually outside of the region. I got some stuff in here that may be of interest for observers elsewhere as well. So let's just see if, come on, next slide. Okay. By and large, observers in Australia and New Zealand pursue their planetary occultations, mostly asteroid occultations, on an opportunistic basis. They observe from home, and whatever occultations come near them, they'll have a go at, almost without regard necessarily to what the specific science objectives of those particular objects. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. I'm certainly operate in that way. It's when you don't have the time and resources to travel extensively or have good portable gear, that's the way that you can participate in this citizen science activity. But it's very easy when you look at your Occult Watcher window these days compared to, say, 5 years ago. It's a very different looking place. There are simply enormous numbers of events coming near you or in your general vicinity, far more than we ever used to see historically. And it does tend to bring a need to focus on what are you going to observe and what are you not going to observe, because for any of us that actually have day jobs or lives outside of our occultation observing, you can't watch them all. It's just not possible. So we're very much in the era now of campaigns and particular focuses for specific science objectives. Many observers in Australia and New Zealand and worldwide will be well familiar with the Lucky Star program, which is ran from around 2015 through to the end of the formal part of the Lucky Star program a couple of years ago. Lucky Star still exists, they still generate predictions. There's just not quite the resources behind the program now to support the analysis and campaigns for particular events. Dave last week talked a lot about the Pluto efforts at the start of June and how there are other professional campaigns to pursue specific science outcomes. So this is the screen on Occult Watcher Cloud, and which sits behind most of our Occult Watcher feeds, and show that there are a number of observing campaigns out there, and these things create reasons to pursue certain events above others. So there's a couple of different programs there, Lucky Stars there down in the lower part of the screen. Others are around particular campaigns around a particular event. The Neptune occultation campaigns there in the middle. Last year, we saw the discovery of the satellite around Arecibo by Dave and Peter, and that's precipitated a campaign to repeat that observation when the opportunities arrive. And so you can subscribe to a feed within Occult Watcher, which targets particular events involving Arecibo specifically, with a hope to catching and updating that. Now, Dave Herald shared with us last week a paper based on Gaia data, which has gone a long way for resolving the orbital characteristics of those pair of objects, which is great. Confirmation by future occultations would be ideal. I just checked just before the start of the session this afternoon. The current Arecibo Moon campaign doesn't have any future events, but then Occult Watcher does operate with a reasonably short future horizon. So I can't really share any upcoming prospects there. One that I did want to talk about was the Across program. Now, I personally am not absolutely across the Across program, but basically, it's a program run out of France, targeting near-Earth asteroids, which are themselves subject to upcoming space missions, DART and Hera. There's a number of objects involved. Didymos is probably the highest profile one. These are very challenging occultations to do, in the sense that the objects are tiny, a kilometre or two in diameter, which means that occultations only occur in tiny spaces, and participation in the CROSS program means travelling to get yourself into a path. The chance of one coming to your backyard observatory is going to be vanishingly small. And then when you do get to that spot, that's very, technically quite difficult to do. Small objects mean extremely short occultations, which means you can't do integration, you can't chase faint stars. But when you do get the event that's right for your equipment, the science payoff here is significant, and is a reason to pursue these events. So CROSS is a feed within Occult Watcher. So if you're a user of Occult Watcher, subscribe to the feed, and any events that come through the filter that you set up there, consider. But as I've just said, these are really events that you have to probably pursue in a different way. It's about traveling to get in the specific spot, and then being realistic about the challenge of chasing the actual event. Many of the predictions on CROSS are very small, are very faint stars, and that's just not realistic when the actual occultation could be as short as 0.1 of a second, a blink. In the Occult Watcher feed at the moment for the CROSS, this is perhaps the only fleetingly credible one for observers in our area to chase using on 9099 CV3. So the star's 12th magnitude. This is coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Again, Occult Watcher only views a relatively short distance into the future, and new events will be popping up all the time. Use your Occult Watcher feed to see them coming. You can see there, maximum duration 0.11 of a second, and that's if you're in the middle. And if you need to be able to resolve and comfortably that magnitude 12 star at those sorts of timescales in order to be able to usefully contribute to this program. But if you've got the equipment to do that, you've got a very keen science audience back in France, eager to see your observations. So just looking through a number of other events coming along. So in this list, I'm basically focusing on events involving brighter stars. So these are objects that will be accessible with smaller telescopes. When I have done remote traveling observations, I actually don't use telescopes at all. I tend to use old film SLR camera lenses. And when you couple them up with a nice sensitive camera like a 910 BD, an event like this one, Impala, across the South Island of New Zealand with a magnitude 8.7 star, you can do that with almost no integration with one of these cameras, with one of these lenses. So the fast 50, 80 millimeter f1.8, f2 camera lenses, old film era stuff. If you've got an arrangement to connect them to a camera, they can make really good portable and remarkably sensitive systems. The thing I find most frustrating about them is aiming them. They're very hard to aim on typical camera tripods. But this is an event coming up in a couple of weeks' time. We've got a strong presence of observers down the south end of the South Island these days. This one sort of threads the way through the usual observer sites, but it would be an easy one to travel for with a very small telescope. This is another one coming up also in a couple of weeks' time, and I particularly wanted to highlight this one for Michael Camilleri, who was on the call last week with the Unistellar EV Scope campaign. So this is a nice bright star, magnitude 9.5. when you look at this prediction, you can see that the dotted lines representing the 1 sigma variation are basically on top of the edge of the path line. So you can know that this is an extremely reliable, solid prediction. And this one's sort of covering that corridor between Auckland and Hamilton. On our side of the ditch, it's well to the south of Canberra, so perhaps we don't have any people in that space, but again, bright enough star and at a reasonably sociable time of the evening for people to catch if they were wishing to travel. Now, what I just wanted to highlight here is in the last 6 months or so, I've had a few interactions with Des Janke, who's the president of the Astronomical Association of Queensland, who also has a unistellar EV scope. And he's been quite keen to pursue some of the occultation opportunities. The last 6 months in Queensland have been terrible for occultations weather-wise, so he hasn't got very far. But he and I have talked quite a bit about some of the predictions. And in the past, some of the predictions from the Unistellar website were actually very inaccurate, quite a long way off it, an event that was good for him in southeast Queensland when the more precisely known prediction was actually down in Victoria. Looking at this one though, the EV scope prediction is pretty much in tight agreement. So it looks like if there were bugs and gremlins in Unistellar's prediction pipeline, at least for this scope, this particular event, they've been ironed out. And so the event is listed there as a prime contender. And I hope, Michael, you can get some people out on that one. That would be an excellent prospect. Something I didn't quite understand, and really only when I made this graphic up this afternoon, finally figured out on the Unistellar prediction website, is that the red lines and the yellow lines, I wasn't sure what was meant to be edges of path boundaries and what were meant to be sigma uncertainty bounds. And it looks like the red line is simply a center line and the sigma is the orange line, and there is no indication in the graphic of where the edge of the path would be. Because in the past, the previous one I talked about with Des, the uncertainties were very large, and so it looked like the asteroid, in this case a Trojan, was enormous, which wasn't true. The path boundary lines actually don't show on their predictions. Okay, so some other sources of predictions. This is from the Lucky Star feed. If you look in the Lucky Star feed these days, you'll see that it's probably dominated by Trojans. Historically, Lucky Star concerned themselves mostly with trans-Neptunian objects. Their focus has shifted a bit to include a lot of Trojans and even some near-Earth asteroids these days, largely because Trojans are generally thought to be captured objects from further out, Trojans, Centaurs, and TNOs. So this is a Trojan prospect that's coming up in September, again with a reasonably bright star, 11th magnitude, but fortuitous prediction path across the Sydney and the southern end of the South Island area, reasonably early in the evening, so not too unsociable. And another one, I think this is another Trojan. This one's actually a little bit awkward. It's west of me and the southeast Queensland observers, but east of the New South Wales observers in their current location. So people will probably have to travel for these. Most of these prediction certainties are pretty firm these days, particularly for the brighter Trojans. I think that's a Trojan. Let me just check. Yeah, I think so. Yep. Okay, another generally bright object, good one for Brisbane-based observers, magnitude 9, just an evening twilight, so hopefully people can get onto the field early enough before it gets, while it's still a little light, but a magnitude 9.6 and pretty close to the zenith, that shouldn't be too much of a drama. Yep. And one for our Sydney area observers, magnitude 9.3. the uncertainty bounds on this one are a little bit bigger than what we see for a lot of objects these days. I'm not sure whether there'll be an update on that one as we get close to the time. That's one's in November. Now, Richard Miles particularly asked me to include something that's of particular interest, again, as a focused area, and that is around occultations of 29P Schwarzmarkman 1. So readers of the JOA will have seen back in the 2021 third volume edition a call for observers to monitor occultations by that comet, well, what was initially seen to be a comet, probably now more considered a centaur that's prone to cometary outbursts from time to time. And we're coming up to a bit of a purple patch of occultations around the world. That article in JOA focused on only a number of the quite large number of events identified, and with a focus on the events that were crossing the more populated parts of the planet than ours, so North America, Japan, Europe. And knowing that we would have a lot of observers on the call today from those parts of the world, Richard was keen that I promote this series of events through December and January coming up. There's quite a spate of events. And as highlighted in that article, there's a great deal of uncertainty about the ephemeris for 29P, such that one of the major things we need to find in the course of this occultation is exactly where in space this thing is. A lot of astrometry is needed there. So there's a range of events from December 19 through to the end of January. There are other events both before and after that, but that particular couple of weeks is very intense with opportunities across the northern hemisphere. That's not to say there aren't any down this way. This is one that with a reasonably bright star, 11th magnitude. It's just not quite where we have lots of observers. With daylight over on the East Coast, it's really a Kimberley thing. The June occultation of Pluto, from what I hear, sounds like there was a reasonable participation of results from out of a number of Indonesian university observatories, and maybe there's an avenue then for them to get involved in this. This is a lucky star source prediction, and I don't know how this prediction path relates to either of the alternatives that Richard's article discussed in JOA. Okay, back to some more general asteroidal occultations. So this is a bright star, seventh magnitude star, just before dawn across central part of the South Island, and perhaps a little to the north of Sydney. But it's a variable star, so it's a very red star and a very large diameter star, and likely to show gradual fades and reappearances. Nice big easy event for those that can get themselves into that path. And another one for Canberra and that central part of the North Island area, so 9th magnitude. Where are we looking? This is February next year. So hopefully warmer weather, maybe even t-shirt observing. I don't know if that's really ever a thing down south. It's definitely a thing up here. And it's quite a long event. So that one's an 18, almost 19 seconds. 9th magnitude star, so with a long duration, then the long exposure. If you do need longer exposures for small equipment, it doesn't use up quite so much of the event duration to resolve. Okay, this is March next year. Another one across that southern part of the South Island, sort of threading itself a little to the north of Dunedin, but well to the south of Canberra. This one, Occult is tagging as a double star, so perhaps some interesting opportunities there. I haven't checked out whether that's a close or a very wide double. Now, well into next year now, I think we're in April. This is a TNO, so a trans-Neptunian object. long duration, relatively bright star, 11th magnitude. And as you can see here, is typical of those more distant objects, the path certainties is an order of magnitude worse than what we would normally see for asteroids. Looks like I might get something here, but it's also might not. Brisbane, Sydney, North Island, New Zealand, definitely worth having a look at that one. Another one for Auckland. This is June 2023, and also just to the south of Melbourne. Not a very big asteroid, and by the look of that, still a reasonable amount of uncertainty in that path position. And that's all I had. Now, previously, I have included some lunar occultations in this slide deck. I didn't do it this year because they tend to be even more localized than just Australia and New Zealand. Probably just worth thinking that in 2023, we sort of see the starts of seasons of some of the more interesting lunar occultations. The Pleiades comes back into play for a series of events. And I think right at the end of 2023, I think Antares actually starts up another sequence of events for people who are interested in monitoring those events. Any questions?
There's a couple of comments. There's a couple of comments there in the chat box, Steve.
Okay. All right, it's a unistellar. Okay, so this was referring to Eichfeldia. So it's a unistellar. This is Michael speaking. It's a unistellar campaign target this month. We are trying to get 6 EV scope observers out for it in New Zealand. That would be brilliant. Really look forward to hearing how you go. Jiri's dropped in a comment here. I can't remember which one that was. Jiri, can you let us know which event that was? And Michael's replied for trying to decode those unistellar graphs. Red is center, yellow is asteroid half width plus 1 standard deviation. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, they don't provide the width of the asteroid, so it does still leave you guessing a bit.
Yes.
So usually I try and find the width of the asteroid, and then if we trying to get a team out, try and figure out what kind of strategy it is, whether it's trying to get a multi-court observation or just merely trying to detect the path.
I guess in Eichfeldia's case, this 1 sigma is virtually on top of the edge of the path, so that makes it easy, but they're not all like that. Excellent, thank you. If there's no other questions, I'll wake up my other computer here to tell me who's speaking next, but I suspect it's Mr. Bradshaw. Jonathan, are you